Good afternoon and welcome to the Balanced Excellent Podcast. We're with Jared DeMichael, the associate head coach of the Michigan State Spartans. Was just elected to the RIT Athletic Hall of Fame. Congratulations on that. Thanks for joining us again for the second time on our podcast, Jared.
Thanks for having me, BJ. Always a pleasure.
All right, let's get right to it, Jared, because we believe, as you know from our last interview, there's a lot of misconceptions, but now between St. Lawrence, your UMass national championship, you've got a breadth and depth of scope of the recruiting thing. And we believe strongly that the parents need to have all the facts to be able to make good decisions. So do the parents. And quite frankly, a lot of the youth and junior coaches do too. So let's get right at it. Hockey is an equivalency sport. Can you tell our fans and our listeners how many athletic scholarships you get and how many guys are on your roster at a season?
For sure. So we get 18 scholarships that we can divvy up however we want. So we have players that are on as little as zero money to as high as 100%. Where I'm coming from at UMass, I think we only had 6 players on our roster that was on a pure 100% athletic scholarship. So the NCAA allows you to pair together academic money with athletic money, and they actually create a rule too where you can use some financial aid with athletic money. But most coming from a state school at UMass and now being at a state school at Michigan State, we do not have a ton of financial aid. So it's mainly merit and athletic money. Our roster size here, we actually have 28 players. So we have 3 goalies, 9 D, and 16 forwards. It's actually a little bit larger. Most of the time you want to have 8 D and 15 forwards, but we've got an extra forward and an extra D. Just with taking over a program and try to elevate things, we want to have a little bit larger of a roster. Something that is potentially coming down the pipeline is unlimited scholarships, but it has not been okayed by the NCAA. It's still like a year or 2 away. But for right now, we have 18 scholarships, and we divvy those up between the 28 players.
And let to the listeners, because you know me, I want it to be as precise so there isn't any pushback to me. These equivalency scholarships, the 18, you are not required by any NCAA rule to use all 18 scholarships with your team. Is that not correct?
Correct. We can divvy them up however we want. Most of the times we obviously do try to spend that money because hopefully you're investing it properly. But there's no rule that says you have to use 18. There's some schools that have 16 scholarships. There's some schools that just have financial aid. There's some schools that have 12 scholarships. I've been lucky to be a part of a program at UMass that actually, when we first got there, it was not fully funded. They wanted us to have a few in-state kids. And if you think the scholarship fully funded means the highest tuition package, which is all international students, even though we will have some in-state students. But here in Michigan State, we are fully funded, and the Big Ten obviously has a ton of resources that we try to take advantage of. But again, it's up to us to divvy up the scholarships however we deem fit.
All right. And because they are equivalency and not head count football and basketball, we're just going to stick with the men's now because that's where Jared is coaching. In this arena, though, a child right now in the United States, because you heard Jared just said this is an international recruiting base he has now, is it a fair statement to make the average child playing youth sports hockey today has way more, and we say it's almost 77 times more ability to get a college scholarship through a non-athletic program than he does a Division I scholarship full ride? Is that a fair statement?
Oh, totally. I mean, we had a conversation with a young man the other day, and we did not offer him a full ride. And he's like, well, I want a full ride. And we were like, well, the people that we deem fit as a full ride is a player, say a forward. It's a forward on the ice that can literally play all situations. So 5-on-5, power play, PK as a freshman, and have an impact on the program on the ice, but also an impact off the ice. So we want people that are 3.5 to 3 or to 4.0 as a student, involved in the community, leaders, and culture kids. And with all due respect to this young man, we didn't see him being a top 6 forward as a freshman. So sometimes we divvy that down, but it opens up the window for them, and it gives them a little bit softer of a landing as a freshman. And we don't like to talk about pressure, because pressure is basically created in your own mind and how you want to handle it. But some people can't handle that pressure as a freshman. So again, I'm coming from a place where we had 6 players on a full ride. Not saying every player is Cale Makar, but we had Cale Makar at UMass. Yes, Cale was on a full ride. Now you watch Cale in the NHL. He's a Norris Trophy winner. He's a Conn Smythe winner. He's one of the best defensemen in the world. So again, not saying everyone needs to be a full ride and to be a Conn Smythe winner, but the investment from the school, it has to be used wisely and in a smart fashion. And we're not just going to sling around money like it grows on trees, because obviously we know that's not the case. So being smart about how we handle it, and the young men knowing what they're getting themselves into too, where usually a player that's invested in a lot of money into that player, there's going to be a lot of expectations for that player when they step foot on campus. Or we do have the ability to start lower and bump a player up, but usually the player proves that his freshman, sophomore year, and then he's basically earned that money. He's basically forced our hand to give him more. But we love to do that everywhere that I've been, and feel like that's good business and smart business.
All right, Jared, let's stay with that, because when you're talking about these kids coming in, we think the average is somewhere the parents have spent $50,000 to $100,000, and we're talking about average. I'm saying 6 figures is not outrageous. I've tried to look it up at least 20 times, where Patrick Kane's dad said he spent over $200,000 before Patrick, but I can't find it and can't prove it. But my question to you is, these parents come in and listen, they have good intentions. They want what's best for their son, but they really, when you break everything down, want a return on their investment. Is that not correct?
Oh, I mean, I think that's why most of the parents are putting all this time and effort into their player, and they have the dream of Division I, or they have the dream of pro hockey. And I mean, obviously there are some schools that cost upwards of $70,000 for tuition. And then there's some other schools that are costing whatever, $30,000 to $40,000, or some schools are less than that if you're an in-state student athlete. So the time and effort that's put in and the money that's put in is definitely at probably a significantly higher number when you're trying to do basically the risk reward benefits of what you're investing in your child. And I think whatever, VJ, we spoke about this, but when I was coming up in New England, there's a ton of summer hockey. And my parents, unbelievable people, very, very supportive, did anything and everything. And they never really pushed me. It was more, I pushed myself, but we didn't know any better. And there was things basically every single weekend. And we had that fear of missing out, or that FOMO. We felt like we had to do every tournament, every showcase, every camp. And looking back on it, literally we could have done like 2 of them and been totally fine. And we've talked about this too, VJ, like I think it's really, really helpful for an athlete to take time away from their specific sport and play other sports. And also too, if you're taking time away, or if you're just working out, or you're just being a kid, obviously you're saving your parents some money if you're just going to the local gym or working out in the basement, rather than going to a tournament where you might have to fly there. You might have to get a hotel. You might have to get a car rental. Obviously, you got to get food. And if you're going with your child, you're spending all that money. Like that's a lot to ask of an individual, of a family. So obviously, you got to do your due diligence when you're looking at these things. But the investment that you put in most cases, is significantly more than what you may be getting out of it with a college scholarship.
And we say it's 99% of the kids in all sports. The parents will pay more money before their child, and it's really only 1 or 2% that get to the Division I and play for free, tops. But 99% will pay more than they'll ever get back. Fair statement?
Totally. I mean, I went to a financial aid school at RIT, and my parents had to pay for me to go there. And um, my parents, I'm very lucky that they were able to support that, and they were on board for me doing that. But they valued the education of RIT. But there's not every family that is on board for that or can afford that and are supportive of that. But academics is a huge part of my family, and that's why they were supportive of that. But I totally understand there's some players that I might be recruiting, and I know if we're going to get involved, there are some kids that they don't come from much and they need a full ride. And it's just like, hey, if you need a full ride, then you need to be a full ride human being as well as a hockey player on the ice. And those kids do not grow on trees. And again, you talked about the 1%. Literally is the 1%. I think most families, it's hard for them to fathom that. And it's like, hey, oh, little Johnny's got a full ride, this and that. Well, it's like, no, like little Johnny maybe has some academic money as well as athletic money, and that's where he's getting that. Or the families are just blowing smoke and trying to keep up with the Joneses. And, oh, I'm in the rink. Hey, he's got a full ride, where actually, he's actually a non-scholarship recruitable walk-on, and that's what it is most of the time. So,
and that's not uncommon. Excuse me, is it, Jared? That's not uncommon to have them come in with the hat or a jacket. I mean, we see it more and more now. And I'm not just talking hockey, but in all sports, they're wearing gear and they're saying things. I used one example. We were working with a family, and the parents said the daughter had a full ride to Brown. Well, other than the fact that Ivy Leagues don't have athletic scholarships, I'm sure he was 100% right.
Yeah. No, the Ivy Leagues do not have any scholarships. It's strictly need-based financial aid. So, and I a lot of the times the kids that are going to Ivies, their families are actually probably paying a full boat, and they're not getting as much aid as what you'd think. Obviously, if they qualify for that money, they're going to get that. But I know there's a lot of families that, we're dealing with right now. We have a player coming in that he's looking at us in a very prominent Ivy League school, but he's a player that's from north of the border, and they don't want to pay anything for school. And when they talk to the Ivy League, they're like, well, you guys don't have scholarship. What's going on? That Ivy League is obviously, it's an unbelievable education, and they have a very strong athletics program. But the family's just like, well, why the heck would I even look there if I have to pay for this? Where the investment in an Ivy League is potentially the job that you get when you graduate. But at the same time, too, it's whatever you put into your school. And I'm a firm believer of that. Obviously, you want to graduate with a strong degree and a strong major. But if you graduate with a 2.5 and barely go to class and pick a major that you don't really care about, then you're probably not going to use that major down the road. Or what majors are job seekers looking for, where they want to hire someone and have them a strong starting salary or an ability to move up in the world. So those things come into play as well, too.
All right, Jared, I want to touch quick back on Cole McCarr. We have a saying wherever I speak, and it's, I speak in all four of the big sports, not much track, but if you're good enough, we will find you. Between the internet and my 21 years as head coach, I got one unsolicited tape of a player that I brought in and that played and graduated for me. Can you just walk us through, in a typical year, how many kids you're bringing in, how many, and applicants isn't the right word, but inquire, how many that you have, and you have your trusted pipeline. And so outside people, not only do they not know what you need, but they don't know your system. They don't know the whole trust basis. And explain to them how sometimes that just becomes annoying and turns the recruiter off.
Yeah, no, we're going to make our own decisions, and we all have our own networks, the college coaches and people that we trust, or people that know how we operate, how we're going to coach, how we're going to develop, what type of players that we like. So obviously, the longer you do it as a coach, the more your network grows and things of that nature. So there are certain areas of Canada, US, Europe, where we have friends or coaches or advisors that we have relationships with that ask us to watch players. It's very hard now to slip through the cracks. First off, the coaches we are all over the place. Most of the coaches, their status with the airlines and the hotels is as high as you can go. Also along those lines too, with recruiting and being places, even when we're not places, and my wife can attest to this. I can't speak for other sports, but for hockey, there's 3 big websites that we take advantage of. One of them is called Hockey TV, where you can basically watch any live midget or junior game in the US, Canada, even over in Europe. And those games are archived as well too. So when we put our kids down to sleep 7:30, most of the time I'm pulling up a game live and watching it on my couch, and my wife might be watching Bravo or HGTV. Then there's another website too that's called Instat, which actually takes the video from Hockey TV and breaks down the individual players' shifts, face-offs, shots on goal, special teams, has analytics. So if I don't want to sit there and watch the full game, I can just pull up VJ's shifts, or the shots on Jared or his puck touches, can pull those up. And then also there's a website that's called Live Barn that's basically in all of the youth rinks in the US and a lot in Canada. So you can pull up live footage from the rink. So if for some reason there's a huge snowstorm and I can't go to the rink, I can pull up the game and watch it. And some of that is archived as well too. And a lot of the midget teams and prep school and high school teams, they also have live feeds and archived feeds. So sometimes you may not see a coach, but some coaches recruit with their eyes in person. Some coaches recruit with their eyes on the computer, and some coaches recruit with their ears, where they might just call a buddy. And if they're that tight with their buddy, they'll make a read on it. But like you were talking to, VJ, what some families don't understand, where most of the time, most colleges, for hockey, they really want to invest in only 2 goalies. They won't invest in 3 goalies. So usually that third goalie is a non-scholarship recruited walk-on. And some families look at him and they're like, hey, why are you taking John when Mike is a better goalie? Well, it's John can afford to pay full boat, where Mike needs scholarship money, and we've already invested our money in other players, or vice versa. Again, we talked about with building a team. Some coaches want to have exactly 4 right shot defensemen and 4 left shot defensemen. So again, some teams, maybe they've hit their quota with right shot D and they really, really need a lefty. Like, why are you taking that player when this guy's better? Well, it's like, hey, we already have guys that we think are better or comparable. We really want a left shot, or maybe I want a really big centerman, or maybe I want a speedy winger. Again, those are the things what families and parents don't know. And most schools don't share that publicly because it's really not smart to do. And at the same time too, hey, maybe we need a right shot defenseman, but we might only have 50% money available, or we might only have 25% of money available, or we might have 25%. And to get it to work, we might have to find a player that has academic money so it gets to 50%. So those are the things which you can't be seen. And also too, with recruiting, and you know this, VJ, like some schools over recruit, they stockpile. So they might have 6 goalies committed and they only have 3 spots, or they might have 15 D committed and they only need 8 D. Like some schools do that, and they'll recruit, and for them it's like fishing. Oh, I'm going to take this fish in, and whatever fish I like, I'm going to keep. Whichever one I don't, I'm going to throw them back into the sea, and somebody else can try to go after it. So that is where families can do their due diligence and can look at. There's plenty of websites online, and you can just Google college hockey recruiting or college hockey commits, and all that information is out there. But most kids think, oh, hey, school X, they already have 5 defensemen in my age group committed, but I think I'm better than this guy, and this guy. Well, it's like, you might think that, but it's really the school at the end of the day. So you have to do your due diligence and do your own research. But some of your research you can't know, and some of them you're not comfortable. The colleges aren't comfortable sharing. Like I think there would be an issue if every single player knew what every single guy was on. Like it's maybe okay when you get to the NHL and the salary cap and that information's out there, but when you're committing 17-year-olds or you got 20-year-olds on your team, some people may not want that information shared. So we try to respect that.
All right, Jared, again, always phenomenal. Thank you again for joining us. We say, and in my experience, and again, college coaching is 80% recruiting. There is a reason that big schools, quote unquote, wink, wink, take care of families with athletes. In a typical year, how many kids will come? And now this is your first year at Michigan State, so we'll just go backwards to UMass. Is that how many kids will inquire to come to you without you going to them first? And what is the microscopic percentage of that will eventually end up with you?
Yeah. So I probably get on a daily basis at least 10 emails at minimum. Some days more than that. And trying to be respectful, because I was once in those players' shoes. I emailed colleges and I would be frustrated when they didn't get back to me, but most colleges take that and put that into the database and find them. But it's a very, very small amount of colleges that'll take information from a player and then get back to it. In my time, there's been one player and he emailed me, but basically he emailed me being like, hey, the school that I was committed to doesn't want me anymore. Watch me. I know we had a previous relationship. I'd love to come and play for you. So that was maybe a little bit freak scenario, but it's a very, very small amount. If we responded to every single email that we got, we literally, I wouldn't have time to spend with my kids, because we get inundated with that much. So again, I like to say,
out is the bottom line. You know
totally
what you're doing.
Yes, we like to say it's like a marriage. It's a two-way street. Like, you can reach out, but if we don't have interest, it's not going to work out. But at the same time, too, we might have interest in you, but you might not have interest in us. So it's got to be a good bond. It's got to go both ways. And there's no issue reaching out to a college, but that just because you reach out to a college and we email you back, it doesn't mean that we're recruiting you. I think when you're being recruited. When you're recruited, we will be contacting you consistently. We will ask you to come to campus. We'll ask for your transcripts. We'll probably talk to your parents. We'll do a lot of information. We'll talk to your coaches. We might talk to your guidance counselor. We'll try to turn every single stone before we make a decision. Just one email from a college does not mean that you're being recruited by that school. And kind of along those lines too, it actually is not a good thing when parents reach out to colleges, text colleges. You're not doing yourself any favors. And again, I went through it. I remember I'd ask my parents, hey, can you call this school? Can you email this school? And I give them credit. They're like, no, it's your future. You need to grab the bull by the horns and handle it. And if you want to make a call, you make it. You want to put an email, you make it. But again, it's who you're going to be on the ice and who you're going to be as a human being and as a student. So you might play on the best team in the world, but if you barely play, if you're the sixth defenseman and play 5 minutes, probably not going to recruit you, even though you're on a really good team. It doesn't really matter. So those things obviously do come into play. And just because you email a school, it doesn't mean that they're going to just automatically drop everything to come and watch you play. Usually we've got a recruiting plan, and if it's convenient, we'll find a way to do it. Or if you're at a showcase that we're already at, that's a smart thing to do. But just because, again, I only have so much time and our staff only has so much time, just because you email someone doesn't mean that it's immediately going to put you at the top of the list. It might be something on the radar, but it's a very long shot for that being the case.
All right, Jared has just gotten to one of my favorite topics, and by favorite topics, for all my followers, you know how sarcastic I can be. Tell me about showcases. If I go and pay money for my son to play on a showcase, he's pretty much getting a D1 ride, right?
That's not the case whatsoever.
Okay, people, listen to this answer. This may be the most important thing you're going to hear in this podcast.
Yeah. So there are certain showcases that I'm literally going to watch one player. I'm there, and there's some showcases that I go to. There's hundreds of teams.
Give them a real number, please. Sorry to interrupt, Jared. Give them a real number in terms of 100, 400, 500, 600.
Yes.
And you're there for one player.
Yes.
Before that showcase was even to all these other guys, you knew this kid was going to be there, and that's the only reason you're going. Is that a fair statement?
Totally. Exactly.
Okay,
and
go on.
I'm getting dialed in on that one player, watching that one player. And obviously, if other players do things to stand out, I will notice that, and hopefully I'm not sleeping at the wheel and missing too much. And I'm far from perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but most of the time you go to a showcase, it's like a handful of less of players that you're there to watch. And, like we might try to peek in on a guy, or we might try to see other guys that we've seen or follow up with them. There's a player that we had at UMass. He was committed to us for 4 years. So we tracked and followed this play for 4 years. There's another player at UMass that I had seen since he was 16 years old and never made an offer until he was 20 years old. Like, saw him, thought he was a good player, but didn't love him, wanted him to get to the stage where he's a great player. And it just took him time, and he eventually got there. But in most of the cases, it's not, the player doesn't get there. It's obviously, whatever people like to say, the cream rises to the top. It's tough to rise to the top. But with the showcases, and again, with hockey, college hockey at least, it's 365. Like, you can literally find a showcase every single weekend to watch hockey. And I think in season, usually you're going to make a good decision on a player because all those players are really focused on hockey. But in the summertime, like, you don't know if player X plays lacrosse, player Z plays baseball, or player A was just on a vacation with his family, or if player C had just been working out and hadn't been on the ice for months at a time. So everyone's kind of all over the place. But again, all that money that you're putting in for the travel to get to the showcase, this and that, the colleges usually have an idea already of who they're going to be looking at. And it's a challenge to get on the radar, and it's a challenge to stay on the radar too.
All right, stay on the showcase, because it's a pet peeve of mine. For most of these kids going to these showcases, I want the parents to know, and I say this all over, so I'm not saying it out of school. I've said it when I was a head coach. Almost all of these kids are there supporting the half a dozen kids that we're really looking at.
Totally. I know that there are some showcases where the quote unquote best players, they might give those best players a break to basically pay the tuition.
Define break.
They might not have to pay, or they'll pay half of it or less of it or none of it. I know that there are some showcases like that is their model. Hey, we're gonna get the 10 best players, and they're all gonna come for free, and everyone's gonna play full rate, and it's gonna make up for those 10 guys not playing, which is actually, I guess, outside tournaments can do that, but if like a college tournament or anything on the campus was ever do that, they're actually not allowed to do that by NCAA rule. So no, there's a lot of money spent on showcases, and that's usually the model for most places. Or where you might get an invite to a showcase, and some showcases do charge people different money, but they're really doing the showcase to help out a few players, and then everyone else is basically there as like a filler. It's no different for me when I thought I was going to play in the NHL for 20 years, but when I went to training camp, I was just a body. I was there for a few weeks because they needed so many goalies, and then they got rid of me. And as much as I thought I'd have whatever I deserved to play, I actually didn't deserve to play. The players were better than me, and it is what it is. But every single year, there's another training camp coming in with more players, and you're just another player that's coming through every single year. And it's, for some of the showcases, it's no different.
And I want to make sure that the parents know these showcases aren't charities. They're making money off of this. This is they advertise, they get the good players in, and as you said, they do the math and they come out of this with a profit. Is that not a fair statement?
No, totally fair. Some people, it's their full-time job. They'll do so many showcases, and like you said, they're on social media, they advertise, they email, they use Google Analytics. They'll have like photographers at the showcases constantly promoting it. That's their way to live, and they hustle to the extreme. but at the same time too, like they might have on their website, oh, hey, so-and-so was seen here. Well, like maybe he was seen there or maybe he wasn't seen there. Like you really have no idea. But this is their way. And not saying it's the best way to make a living, but that's how some people do it. And again, for my son or daughter, if they were to play hockey, I would be very smart about how I was spending my money on the showcases, if any of them.
All right. And listen, Jared and I both want to say that we're not criticizing these showcases en masse. What we're trying to tell the parents is you can't make the best decision for your child now and in the future unless you have all the facts. And we don't believe they're getting all the facts. Yeah. So off of my showcase rant and back to more of the recruiting in a year. So you're saying 25 to 28 players on a team, because I want the parents to know this. On this 25 to 28 Division I college team, you may turn over at most 8 or 9 in a year. Is that Correct. A fair statement? Okay.
Correct.
So literally out of a pool, and it's an international pool, out of hundreds of thousands of children playing hockey, because you really recruit sometimes you recruit 3 years ahead. I'm sure you guys can do it better than that. But what I'm trying to explain to the parents is you only need 8 guys. You have all year to get these 8 guys, and they're not just 8 guys this year, as you said about the 16-year-old. You've been watching him for year after year. So the fact that somebody could come in and say, I have this recruiting service, or I'm doing this, or I went to this showcase, and I'm not trying to be mean here, literally means almost nothing to you because you already have your plan. Fair statement.
Correct. There are some schools that, like you said, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, like they have everything planned and they do not deviate from that plan. There are some other schools that have that plan, and then if players don't progress, they'll get rid of that player and then just add another player. So where I was coming from at UMass, we didn't go as far down the road. We did have a few younger players, but we kind of wanted players to mature a little bit. Late bloomers, probably selfishly, I always saw myself as a late bloomer, and put a lot of stock in the grind, in having a chip on your shoulder, in proving people wrong. That's what we were recruited to at UMass. Going to recruit very, very similarly here at Michigan State. Everyone gets so caught up in the blue chip players, but the older, mature players that have the battle scars, that have been away from mom and dad, that have gone through some adversity, that have failed, there's a lot of positives to those failures that they're going to be prepared in college when everybody, like Mike Tyson would say, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Or those older players, they've been punched in the face a few times, figuratively, not literally, hopefully not in most situations, but they know how they're going to react, and they're going to react in a positive fashion. So at UMass, usually we were going into our fall, we were maybe looking for 1 or 2 players max.
I'm sorry.
And a lot of time.
Yeah. Can you repeat that again for the parents and the coaches and the recruiting services? How many were you looking for?
1 or 2 max. And that's, again, in basically the whole entire world. And sometimes we might have a full ride. Sometimes it was a non-scholarship spot. So again, I think everyone can afford a full ride. Not everyone can afford a non-scholarship spot. So that's, again, where the pool gets significantly smaller and tighter, when maybe we need a player and a family that can afford to pay a lot of money. So that's where things will change there.
All right. Jared brought up my all-time favorite subject, because I started hockey when I was 12. Got to Clarkson, got hurt after 1 game, actually 2 concussions in a week, 7th and 8th, ended my career. But I am huge. We kept a spot open, our last spot open, every year at the U of R for a late bloomer or a walk-on. And Jared went over how much these kids have matured and learned. But what we want to take away from this is these kids learn from failing, and the coaches and the parents need to stop saying they're failures. They think there's not a big difference, but if you could explain to our audience what huge difference that is.
Yes. So, again, I brought up Cale Makar earlier. Cale Makar committed to UMass when he was 17 years old. So fairly young, but also when he committed to UMass, he was maybe 5'7". Wasn't thought of a blue chip player, was not thought of, oh, he needs to go play major junior, was thought to be he was going to be a good college defenseman and then go from there. And then he had a huge growth spurt. He grew to right around 6 feet tall, and he went from being a good college player to 4th overall draft pick in the NHL. We also had another player at UMass named Mario Ferraro. His first year of junior hockey, I remember watching him play at the first showcase, and I was just like, he's small, his feet are huge, his hands are huge. Like, I don't know what to think of him. And then by the end of the season, he grew into his body, and he went from being 5'8" to actually being 6'1". And again, this does not happen to everybody, but that's what happened with him. Chris Tanev, who I played with at RIT, Chris came to RIT, and he was not thought to be a blue chip player, but going into his last year of junior, he grew significantly. And even after he left RIT at 19, 20 years old, he was still growing. He, like at RIT, he was 6'1". Now he's 6'2", maybe even 6'3". So he hit that late growth spurt, but he went through a lot of adversity. He faced failure. He didn't play. He was out of the lineup. He didn't play a lot. And again, I've said selfishly for myself, I went through that as a goalie. It took me a little bit longer. It seems like in hockey, defensemen and goalies need more time. And I don't know if it's the position or the brain or how the body matures. It could be everything. But those two positions specifically need more time. And forwards can maybe mature a little bit faster. But again, with that being said, our team at UMass that won the national championship, our freshmen were mainly 20 years old, a few 19-year-olds. We at UMass, I was there 6 years. This past season, we had our first ever legitimate true freshman. Was not a late birthday, was a legitimate true freshman. But that young man was a 3rd-round draft pick, already played 2 years of junior hockey. And when he left junior hockey, he's one of the leading defensive scorers in the USHL. He was on the World Junior team, was a 3rd-round draft pick, and had dominated his level, clearly dominated. And when we committed him originally, we thought he was going to have to do another year. But to his credit, he forced our hand, and we're like, hey, you're going to play a lot as a freshman. We're gonna bring you in. So along the lines too of the older late bloomers, those players too socially are significantly more mature. They are with the billet families. They know how to make their bed. They know how to make a meal. They know how to do their laundry. They've been away from mom and dad. Socially, they've been in multiple situations. They're not an 18-year-old being away from mom and dad in situations that they haven't experienced before. So we want.
And you recruit that. Let me be clear. Sorry, Jared. You recruit that. That is a characteristic that not only do you recruit, you define and look for. Is that fair?
Totally. It's a skill. It's a skill.
Yes.
It's a skill to be a late bloomer. It's a skill to have a chip on your shoulder. We had a player, again, referring back to UMass, we had a player this past year, senior Bobby Trevino. He was a Hockey East Player of the Year. When he was 16, he was on the AA team at Shattuck. The AA team at Shattuck is comprised of kids that are basically there to have fun. But Bobby, to his credit, was focused, motivated, wasn't going to take no for an answer, kept fighting, kept competing, kept getting a little bit better. He's not a big player. He's only like 5'8", 5'9", but he's got the heart of somebody that's like 7'2". So that player went through a lot of hard situations where he's looking left, he's looking right, and kids are committing or kids are saying, oh, he's the best player ever, or he's going to go to the NHL. And you know this too, VJ, the high-end kids, when they're 14, 15 years old, a lot of the time are not the high-end players when they were 19, 20, 21. It changes. And too often it's publicized, oh, this guy's a freak when he's 14 years old, and then he's still a freak when he's 18. But again, that player is like less than 1%. The Sidney Crosbys, the Connor McDavid, the exceptional status, that gets so blown out of proportion. The majority of the players kind of hit their stride late in their teens or in their early 20s. But like how you said, it's a skill. We want high character, low maintenance hockey players. And those older players are more low maintenance on the ice, off the ice, but we still feel they have a lot of ability to develop and grow because we've seen that growth over time. And usually if those players have that growth mindset, they'll continue to grow in the right direction. And it's not a perfect science, but the 18-year-old that's never been punched in the face that shows up on campus, there's no way to judge how he's going to react.
Yeah, people don't understand. One of my, I like to call them my useless degrees. It's not, it's a good degree, but in psychology, adolescence actually goes on to the age of 25 to 27, according to all the psychologists and all my studies. The last one, I just also, before I ask you the last question, thank you again for your time, is I just want people to understand, not only was Cole Makar a lottery pick, but even in Calgary, or he was from Western Canada, right? Yes.
He's from Calgary.
Calgary. Even from Calgary at 5'7", he was already known. Is that correct? Already known at 16 years of age.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no hiding. But okay, so here's our final one. You're hopefully, we hope the next time we're talking to you, you're the head coach of a college hockey team, because you're certainly on that trajectory, and we all hope it for you. But we're going to put on the dad hat because now you have a daughter and now you're a dad, and I like to kid about it. But your daughter is now a 16-year-old, I'll go 14-year-old freshman in high school. And because of dad's genes, and maybe, as I like to say, it skips a generation, the grandparents' genes, she can play hockey, and she's good. Good for the area. I'm just saying good for the area. And somebody says to you, Jared, why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z? And you tell them, we have a plan for our daughter that includes multiple sports, fun, vacation, because that's what the colleges are truly looking for, to be better human beings. How do you explain that to the parents?
Yeah, that's totally accurate. And I'll talk about two situations. So we took a goalie at UMass from Buffalo. Being from Rochester, still have ties to Western New York. My wife is from Buffalo. She's a full-time member of the Bills Mafia. I'm a part-time member of the Bills Mafia. But the young man that we had, the young man that we were recruiting, I had seen him play for years. But I also knew, too, that he was a really good baseball player. I also knew, too, that both of his parents were Division I athletes. So figuring with their genes, and maybe it skipped a generation or maybe it didn't, but I knew that he hadn't focused just on hockey until he was 19 years of age. And my thought was that there's a significant chance that his game is going to grow, but also his body isn't beat up from playing just hockey for years. That young man ended up getting invited to the U.S. World Junior Camp. He got invited to an NHL camp this past summer, and I think he's got a legitimate chance to be a Division I starting goalie. But when he was 16, 17, you would have thought, oh, like, he's so inconsistent. Well, yeah, he's inconsistent because he's playing a million different sports, and who really cares when you're 16? Like, what do you need to be the best 16-year-old player in the world? Like, nobody ever remembers that. So,
and you're looking for that, though. This is an actual, like you said earlier, this is not, isn't this a skill you're actually now focused on that is important?
Totally. And so I was looking at him and another goalie, and I thought they were very similar people on the ice, grades. But when I heard he hadn't focused on hockey, that got him the edge on this other player. And I think we've talked about this too, VJ, but for me, my path, I played 3 varsity sports in high school. I was varsity soccer, varsity hockey, and varsity baseball. Until high school, I actually also played basketball, loved basketball, and golfed as well too. So I give my parents credit, and maybe it was just me being different at that time, but like when everyone was just playing hockey or just playing soccer, I was like, hey, you play soccer in the fall, it's great, I love it. And then, okay, when it's done, I'm going to play hockey and just focus on hockey for the winter. And then when it gets warm out, I'm going to play baseball. And then in the summertime, hey, I'm whatever, probably keep playing baseball through the summer. If I want to do a hockey thing or two, maybe, but I'm probably just going to focus on working out and playing baseball because that's the way the seasons lay. And again, this might date me, but going to Avon Old Farms Prep School, I remember Brian Leach was a very good player, obviously, in the NHL. I believe he won the Conn Smythe, played on the U.S. Olympic team. but he was an unbelievable baseball player, like through in the 90s. And he did not focus just on hockey until he got to Boston College. But I think him playing different sports helped. And even for me, when I was in college, our equipment manager at the time, who's now the associate AD at RIT, him and I would play racquetball. And we'd play racquetball a couple days a week. And I felt like playing racquetball, the hand and eye, the motion was similar to me with my blocker hand and things like that. Obviously, hopefully I wasn't swinging at guys in the crease and stuff like that. But playing that sport in my early 20s, I felt enhanced my play on the ice, my hand and eye, my focus. And those types of things aren't any joke. But again, too, I actually saw something put out the other day, an article from a very prominent strength and conditioning coach that said that athletes that are teenagers should not focus on one sport. And if they do, at minimum, they should take 2 months off, minimally, nothing whatsoever with that sport. But that same individual said ideally that they would take 4 months off. He said, if you take 2 months off, you maybe can survive. That's survive. He said, if you take 4 full months off from that sport, then you have the potential to thrive and develop and improve. And everybody wants to get better, but the mindset that, I got to get more ice. I got to get more at bats. I got to get more shots, more this, more that, more. It's going to wear down your body. And that's why you see a lot of injuries happening to different athletes, because their hips, their groins, their knees, their shoulders are so overused because they're doing the same motions over and over again. I remember when I was coming up, injuries I felt like were few and far between because athletes were switching from sport to sport, and maybe when their body might be getting wear down, then they did a different sport that was maybe working on different parts of their body. But at the same time, when you're playing different sports that are working on different parts of your body, it's enhancing your overall body. It's enhancing your mind. It's enhancing things that you can't even see, development areas that you might not even think about. That's going to make you a more well-rounded athlete, and a more well-rounded athlete for your specific sport at the end of the day.
Jared, we can't thank you enough. You told us you'd give us a half an hour, and it's 3/4 of an hour. We get this out to all our followers, and we are truly, humbly appreciative of all the experience and all the championships and everything you've accomplished, that you took time out to help us with our journey. Thank you so much, Jared.
Thank you.